about the biggest league in the world. Unfortunately, our team is not as big. Today, no Ryan Sikora with us, out doing God knows what, aka celebrating his own birthday. How dare he? But I'm with John Morrissey, the Oracle, in New York, New York. I'm Peyton Gallagher in the Miami region, you might say. We'll start off, John, with a game that was in this region as well, a team that I actually saw driving across Alligator Alley for the Open Cup this weekend at SC Naples. Tampa Bay, at home at Al Stadium, big-time opponent. Louisville City in town for a game that pits two of the, I guess, perennial titans of the league against one another. And Tampa showed some pluck. I'm curious about on this observational invitational where you might have found observations.
I mean, on the Tampa Bay side, especially in the first 60 minutes or so of the game, I came away pretty impressed with the balance they were able to strike offensively. We saw against Naples, that game you were at, Tampa Bay really running with a 4-4-2 shape out and out.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt like it clicked a lot more against Lou City. You saw Pacius and Ardiaga up top show a lot of give and take in terms of their motion. I thought Ollie Bassett cutting in from the left side was quite sharp. I think the interesting thing for me was the use of the fullbacks. This is a team that's missing Nick Moon, missing Blake Bodley, and they're using Aaron Guillen and Thomas Van Kuyziel at those spots. Not exactly the types of players that are going to push forward and dominate games on the overlap. In essence, though, I think the depth of their positioning played nicely against Louisville. It strengthened the rest defense, made it harder for Lou City to get out on the counter. It gave a little bit more space for Bassett and Nyongabiri to do their thing on the wing. Did it ultimately lead to a win? No, and that's a credit to Lou City and really a way to encapsulate what Tampa Bay has kind of suffered throughout this season. But you can feel the chemistry starting to come into place. Some of the new signings are clicking. Obviously, you need points at some point in the season, but if you're a Rowdies fan, I think you have some real takeaways that you feel good about from this one.
Yeah, and you tell me, you've probably watched Tampa more intently than I have gotten the chance to throughout the course of the year, but it feels like under Steve Coleman, there's more of an intention to press and accelerate the temperature of games.
I think that's fair. Robbie Nielsen was somebody who liked to press, but it feels like more of a team effort. It feels like the back end is a little bit more engaged. I think the shape of the 4-4-2 simplifies things in a way that has done well for this team. And it really unsettled Louisville for a lot of this match, especially when Kevon Lambert was the guy in the pivot.
Yeah. Yeah, it's another game that's evidence, and this is a little bit stunning with Kevon Lambert in this role, playing as that kind of destroyer in midfield for them. Another game in which an opponent on their home patch dominated the duels against Louisville and made it tough for them. Now, I do like Louisville's response. Fluky goal goes in, hits the underside of the bar at a weird trajectory, and then spins across the line on a moonshot. But they rallied, and in large part, that came from Sam Gleadle coming into this game, in my estimation, as the 9. I do want to talk a little bit about what he has provided in that role as a change of pace to Philip Goodrum, and if you think that there's any credibility revisiting this that theory of a more fluid front three, that might be the approach for Louisville.
Yeah, I mean, a couple weeks ago, we talked about the idea that maybe they mix it up. Having seen what Gleadle did in the Open Cup, having seen him this weekend, he feels like a striker as opposed to Philip Goodrum that is able to get involved in play a little bit
Yeah.
more, be a linking player. You saw it on the equalizing goal, where another substitute who came on with Gleadle, Evan Davila, he was the guy sitting deep, initiating, finding the striker. Gleadle is in position and lays it off to Taylor Davila for the goal. It's the sort of connectivity that is pretty easy to miss. It's pretty easy to take for granted. But Louisville didn't have it for a lot of this game until Evan Davila and Sam Gleadle get on. Obviously, Gleadle kind of poaches that second goal. It's a wing back cross that gets cut back across the middle of the goal. He knocks it in nicely. That's the instinct that Louisville, frankly, has missed so far this season. It won them the game at Al Stadium. If you're Danny Cruz, I don't think you can be precious about saying, oh, we paid a record transfer fee
Yeah.
for Goodrum. He has to start when Gleadle is the guy that's producing.
Yeah, we've got enough of a data set at this point. Like, it's not certain media members may have indicated this is a valid data set this early part of the year to say we know what a team is. I don't think 7 games is that. I don't think we can mark a team a failure this early into the year, a player's role in a team a failure this early into the year. But I will say that we have enough information to say that nothing has changed through these first couple games for Goodrum. And with Gleedle, who is averaging a way higher share of touches in the per 90 split than Goodrum is, I think it's like 5 more on a much smaller sample size. Player who's now scored in his last 2 games, given the Cup and the league, also had an assist in this game as well, credited to him. I don't know. At a certain point, you have to look at it for Louisville and say we are much more lethal with Gleedle in this kind of role and the fluidity that provides, at least in my estimation.
And if you can be a team that just rides the hot hand, you use Gleedle until the goals dry up, and then Goodrum gets the second chance. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, so long as Goodrum's willing to be the second banana for a little bit.
Yeah. And I'll also counterbalance that by saying this. I always start from the presumption that the coach is much smarter than I am. And I was trying to think through the counter arguments to this because it feels like it's becoming increasingly apparent to me that Gleedle is contributing more than what they're getting from Goodrum. I guess a counter argument might be the counter press, which you lose in coordination from having such an agitating kind of movement from Gleedle in terms of what he's doing to defenses. Goodrum's going to be in the same spot every time. So when you're trying to coordinate a counter press, maybe it's a little bit more helpful to know where everybody's going to be where you lose the ball as opposed to Gleedle, who's interchanging with a Wilson or a Perez. Do you think there's any water in that thought?
I think there's absolutely water in that thought. I think that Goodrum is also somebody who's stronger in the air, and that's
Sure.
important to the way that Louisville likes to build out long on restarts. Is that a marginal game, and can headers be a 50-50 a lot of the time? Sure, but it's meaningful over the course of 90 minutes, multiple weeks, and you wonder, do you lose something by making that change? Because in the context of this game,
Yeah.
Tampa Bay is sitting back. Gleedle feels like the perfect player to come in, get touches between the lines, and do his thing. You wonder if Cruz will be maybe quicker to make this change going forward, even if he's not changing his starter from the opening whistle.
Do you think there's any other viable option within this Louisville team concept other than a change of shape for what they could do for number 9?
I mean, Jansen Wilson played there a very little bit last season. He's really a Swiss Army knife of a player. I tend to think it's going to be one of these two, and I tend to think Cruz is going to stick with his system because it's working for him.
Yeah, I do want to speak on Taylor Davila, who maybe has not gotten the same kind of oxygen this year that he got last year in terms of buzz. I think simply from the fact that he had a perfect partner in Elijah Winder that did a lot of the busy work. Really, the underrated part of Winder's game to me is that his ability to time up that kind of diagonal looping run into the gap as the second man that opens so many things up for Davila. That's not been there this year. I feel like his involvement's been maybe a little bit more muted if Louisville played even harder against the ball. But he reminds you in this game that when the ball falls to him in zone 14, there may be no better player technically, and doing the Tony Cruz just pass into a corner. That was a gorgeous goal from him.
Absolutely perfect hit from him in a game where he felt unsettled for about
Yeah.
60 minutes or so until his brother came on. I thought early on Davila was playing quite deep, and Lambert was more of the attack dog, pushing upfield, trying to contest play. It felt like the wrong way to use Davila, and you said it yourself, the coaches know better than us. Danny Cruz clearly had an intention behind that choice. But man, it's hard to ignore that 30-minute sample size when it was Davila in the midfield, and Taylor could just do his thing in zone 14. The goal was the payoff, but I think the totality of how he ran the show from that zone felt so important to the comeback and the ultimate win for this team. He's a terrific player. He's, I think, created 11 or 12 chances already this season. He should be getting the shine because he's on pace for another all league season if he keeps this up.
Yeah. Do you, to maybe zoom out a little bit and look at the ethereal aspect of the game and maybe get out of the gears and the grind of the tactical stuff, Did you think the response from Louisville in this game was better than it was against Sacramento on the road? I feel like their approximate challenges against a team like Tampa Bay, a team like Sacramento on opposition turf.
No, I thought they showed more spark for sure. Some of that is just the Rowdies rivalry. This is a game that matters to these teams. Although, granted, you could make the counter argument that the Neil Collins rivalry should have mattered more than that. But yeah, I think Louisville is realizing maybe it's not going to be as easy as it was last season. We're not building those first half leads. We need to battle a bit more. Cruz making that, I think it might have been a triple sub around 60 was the
Yeah.
real kick in the butt this team needed to go on and have that response.
Elsewhere in the East, Detroit and Rhode Island FC. This was looking at the score lines, probably the one that you looked at and said, "Ooh, okay, that is a headline grabber." 2-0 to Detroit here in this one. Frano Darce sent off after 5 minutes. I'm going to say this. I think if there's VAR, maybe that is downgraded to a yellow card. But with that said, I'm not going to begrudge the official who does not have that luxury. Saw a player strike out another player's face. He immediately goes for the red card. Even though I think the contact was maybe a little bit over embellished, I'm not going to get mad at the referee, but it does set the context for this game as a whole. Detroit taking it. I really liked how immediate they were on the throats of Rhode Island, though, Detroit, and taking advantage of the fact that they had the man advantage.
Late in that comeback win against Phoenix, the thing that Detroit did to up the ante offensively was let Devin Mensa do what he wanted
Mm-hmm.
up that left half space, up that left channel. And as soon as they went up a man, Mensa had that freedom. That added a numerical advantage against a Rhode Island team pressing in like a 5-3-1 shape. Just didn't have the numbers to stop Detroit from initiating. And once Detroit was lodged into the final third, I loved the motion. Jesse El Cedeno and Jay Chapman really getting into zone 14, really probing from side to side. Darren Smith constantly on the back shoulder of any defender near him. He obviously gets the 2 goals here, and he's got 6 on the season already. Somebody who's developing into a number 9 that defenses have to respect.
Yeah.
From the jump, even in this game before the red card, I thought it was notable that Reese Williams was starting on the left side. Another late game thing from the Phoenix comeback that Danny Nicchio is saying, hey, maybe that should be a facet of this club going forward. The red card changes the dynamic, but I still love the ideas we're seeing from Detroit.
Yeah. I think that you bring up a great point with the Amu Mensa thing, which is another player that perennially probably does not get enough love. And I do really appreciate that how DiCio has unlocked this characteristic in his game as a ball carrying outside center back. I think he does that role as well as anybody, if not better than anybody in this league. Like he's a player I could see doing some of the things that Wilfred Nancy asks Columbus Crew to do with the outside center backs carrying the ball, initiating. And the thing that you brought up, I think, that really stuck out to me about what he did in this game is by getting into those spaces, allowed them to switch just constantly, left to right to left. As soon as Rhode Island felt comfortable behind the ball, they would change the point of attack, and that really disorganized them when you factor in the movements that Cedeno and Chapman were providing in the middle of the park, constantly getting different angles and surfaces to run onto, which renders the observation I wanted to bring to the table really pertinent to me, which is they have the ability on the X or Y axis to access the space in behind with a single ball at any time because of what Reese Williams brings as a crosser and what Cedeno brings as a guy who can play that ball into the channel or over the top. And Darren Smith is totally perfect to exploit that. Detroit showed that off to the tune of a Smith brace in this game. But I've got more on this. I just want to get your initial impressions of that thought.
No, I think that's right. And I think you can't undersell the importance of Smith to that mix.
Mm-hmm.
That second finish he got off, I think it was a Connor Rutz through ball, where it's this first time, like right footed, kind of curled, kind of chipped. That's a strike you are going to see from elite forwards in this league and nobody else. Smith has instantly kind of changed the game for Detroit. And the knock on effect is defenses have to respect him. They need to be aware and put bodies on him at all times. It opens up that much more room for what you're talking about with Williams and Cedeno. because there is that distraction, that constant note in your head of what if I'm letting Darren Smith
Yeah.
get free. It's something Detroit has lacked for probably their entire run in the USL Championship, if we're being real here. And Smith feels like he brings that element to the table.
It's so interesting because he's such a different front man um, than the guy that they actually lined up against in this game, in Maxi Rodriguez. If he's going to be the guy that's on the poster, if you will, it is so much more explosive than anything Detroit has ever really had. What he's done over the last, let's say, 100 minutes, right? I think that it's really clever what they're doing, dropping him in. When we talk about strikers dropping a line, it's usually to involve themselves in the build-up, to maybe play that role of a false nine. I don't think he's really doing that when he drops in. All the times, it's almost like he's running suicides, and he'll drop a line just so he can get a runway and to make one of those darting runs in behind. And it makes you wonder how Detroit went, whatever it was, nearly 200 minutes, 200 plus minutes into the Phoenix game without scoring a goal. I don't know what to make of them right now at all and how much of a threat they are in the East.
I think there is a consistency issue. I think that the way in which they build out can be very focused on getting touches for Ryan Williams and Jay Chapman. And if you can't do that, there isn't really a plan B. They've not been great going long and trying to win second balls. When they get pinned back, it doesn't feel like the counter outlet has been
Yeah,
consistent enough. Some of that is going to come with time as these players get their relationships. I don't know if I've seen enough Darren Smith tape to say he can be like an Olex Anderson, that sort of threat on the break. So there are areas to improve, even if when Detroit is dictating the game
yeah,
as they want to, there are few teams in the East or the USL writ large that can be as effective as they look at their
yeah.
best.
Like you said, it Smith is not a player that threatens you with long speed. It's all about quickness and mischievous little movements, right? His change of pace to me is the thing that is his superpower. He gets from 0 to 100 so fast, hard for defenders to deal with. And then when you mix in to the fact that an accomplice in the form of Connor Rutz is such a perfect guy to partner with him, because it feels like he's comfortable and almost excited to do a lot of the task mastery stuff, the counter movements, the runs where he knows he's not going to get the ball, so that Smith can maybe make that lateral run across the back line and get into a new spot. It always just feels like Smith is freelancing and noodling and trying to find where the gap is. And Detroit at their best are able to use guys like Cedeno and Williams to play the killer pass and take advantage of that. It just feels a little bit one note, I guess, at times. And that one note played really well against the 10 men Rhode Island. How do you feel about how Connor Smith adapted after the sending off?
I mean, I think when you're down to 10 men, you always have a hand tied behind your back, very literally. I think it was somewhat uninspired from Connor Smith, if I'm going to be honest here. Rhode Island needs to be a team that is taking the fight to the opponents, trying to be the aggressor. I sympathize with the idea of, okay, whatever, we're putting Jorge Quizera into the back line because he started this game as a forward, which I was thrilled to see
Yeah.
and excited to see. But going to the back five, saying, we're just going to try to see this out. Maybe we can scrape something with Noah Fuson over the top. It felt like he was settling in a way that we've rarely seen Rhode Island settle. Damned if you do, damned if you don't, if you're Smith in that situation. But it felt like they played into Detroit's hands a little bit too obviously.
Yeah, and I'm personally, and I'm going to add a couple qualifiers here before I really
Sure.
get into the carcass of this Rhode Island game. But it should be said, this team has played all their games on the road. They've traveled a lot, and it's not been a necessarily pleasant start to the season. So that's going to have some wear. The performances are naturally, I think, going to be a little bit more insipid because of that fact. And that is something that has to be contextualized when looking at their start to the season. Beyond that, anytime you go down to 10 men 5 minutes into the game, let alone at a place like Keyworth Stadium against this Detroit team, in that atmosphere, which was turned up to a rare level even for Detroit, um, it's not going to be easy. With all that said, I do think that this Rhode Island team in that game looked as disorganized as I can recall them looking. It looked like they didn't really understand what was being asked of them throughout the course of the game. And I'm just a big believer that if you have a guy get sent off that early, your first impulse should not be to bunker because you're just not going to last 85 minutes. It needs to be to immediately try and shell shock your opposition, ambush them after the guy gets sent off, and take the fight to them, understanding if we concede here, it's probably going to happen regardless, and this is going to give us the best chance to win, because if we can get a goal here, we can change the flow of the game and disorient them a little bit. Immediately went into a bunker, looked like Arsenal against Manchester City earlier this year, where it's like, yeah, if a player decided to fall down in that second line of defense, his head would be behind where the second line behind him was, right? Like there was that little space between lines, all packed in on top of the 18. Like Detroit's eventually going to find a way through that. Again, I don't think it's necessarily fully fair to just be like, okay, wee woo, Rhode Island went to a final last year, 6-7 games in, what's wrong with them? But also in the same breath, like, it's not like the performance has been encouraging and the results haven't, right? The performance has also been bad.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in this game, Maxi Rodriguez's return, you think he's going to bring it.
Yeah.
And again, like you've got the caveat of the red, but Maxi's coming off at halftime because he's not really making an impact in the course, in the run of the play. That's disappointing to see. And I think it encapsulates a lot of the frustration around this club right now.
Yeah. I had Maxi's game last year against San Antonio. I called that game, and that was a return game for him. Super sentimental from San Antonio. That's where he got his professional start, and he played like his hair was on fire. He was a ghost in this game. Did nothing. Again, put in a position where he was naturally going to have limited impact, but he looks like a shell of himself right now. And that feels like the entire Rhode Island team just isn't playing with the charisma and creativity and character that we saw throughout the back end last year. And that is worrisome. I think that's legitimate.
Yeah, it's legitimate. I'm holding out real judgment until we see him at Tidewater Landing, but you have to be a little bit worried at this point.
Yeah. Yep. A team that this Rhode Island team beat a week ago, 2 weeks ago, whenever that happened. It all blurs together. Oakland Roots. That's the last time we saw Rhode Island, and really the only time we saw Rhode Island look really good this year, aside from, I guess, the Phoenix game. Oakland's won 2 on the skip, though, out of nowhere. Beating OC in this game, and I think the main point is they kind of got back to what served them so well last season, went back to basics.
Yeah, back five in low block, 3-4-3 when you're attacking. It was Gavin Glinton's go-to throughout 2024, and it's a different set of players running that system this season. We'll be very clear about that. But it makes Oakland look like a coherent soccer team, and that's something you couldn't have said through the first month of the season. I think what impressed me most about Orange County was the way in which they denied players like Kyle Scott the ability to ever get comfortable in the midfield. I called the press a 3-4-3, but really they were sitting in a back five whenever they didn't have the ball. But you'd allow one of the central midfielders, usually Babosi Bayarahunga, to step forward as Tyler Gibson kind of became the proper holding midfielder, anchoring things further back. The result of that was Scott always had pressure down his back. The wingers as well, like Wolfgang Prentice, were willing to kind of drop in, provide that second body on Scott. It made it difficult for Orange County to find their primary offensive outlets as they tried to build out. Oakland did well at the back end, providing ball pressure, cutting out passing lanes when Orange County tried to skip lines. It just felt like a very, I don't know, true to form Oakland Roots game because this team was never really that sexy, even when they were winning and getting results last season. They're best when they can just be defensive, work out of the back five, and then rely on really brilliant forward movement, which is what we're getting right now between Prentice and Wilson and Jose Sinisterra up top. We were talking a bit before the show, like we don't know if this team is really a competitor, but it feels like they've got enough grit, enough pep to give some teams some trouble, and you saw it against OC.
This style of play gives them a ceiling that is in the playoffs, which I could not say through the first couple of games. And I do appreciate the notion that there is something, too, in the USL, even in the MLS, to playing with a sense of we're going to wait for our opponents to make a mistake because we know they're going to give us opportunities. Oakland did that. They cashed in the result, and they just didn't beat themselves, right? And you move on to the next game and see if you can compile enough points to have something to show for it at the end of the year. I don't think there was anything in this performance that's like game-changing. that is a hallmark of their ability to control whether or not they necessarily win or lose games down the road when their opponents don't make mistakes. But I will say they didn't beat themselves today, and I just think that like in the long run, that is what it is. But if Wolfgang Prentice is going to score every game, it'll work, right? Like they had 10 piano carriers out there on Wolfgang Prentice, and that might be the deal that gets him across the line.
You kind of mentioned the more ethereal aspects of the game earlier. I think it matters for Oakland that they have 11 players who are bought in, intense,
Yeah.
going for it for 90 minutes. And that is what this lineup is doing right now. That forces teams into errors, that gives you chances. It's a real change from the disinterested looking Roots team that we saw in March and early April. And again, like maybe the ceiling is eighth place, but that's a heck of a lot better than we were thinking 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, and I will say this as well. Retracting some of the more attractive players in this team, like Apanos Armanakis, like a Camden Riley, who's a bit of a gadget guy who did not play in this game. Speaks to a utilitarianism that Gavin Glinton clearly understands is the best pathway to victory. Also, contribute the notion that I think they married that back five to the press extremely well. They mitigated the width that OC is dependent upon with those second wave runners from the fullbacks in a way that gave them the best chance to win, but also allowed them to press their opponents in a meaningful way and fabricate the chances that led to both goals. I think that Gavin Glinton, in a way, has actually put on maybe the best coaching performance I can recall from him in the last, going back to last season and cutting out the off season, like 4 months, 5 months.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, easily. And granted, I feel like there is a caveat here on the Orange County side of things. This is a game where the right side of their team from the get-go is Bryce Jamison and an out of position Pedro Guimaraes. That's a set of players that is very young and clearly was not comfortable in the face of the press. We talked a ton last week about how good Ethan Zubak has been leading the line and providing really unselfish movement. He wasn't in the team, and Mohamedou War didn't occupy defenders in that same way. So you've kind of got this double trouble of a right side that's susceptible to the pressure and a front end that isn't forcing the press to bend. It played into Oakland's hands, but again, Oakland set themselves up to take advantage and they deserve credit for it.
yep. In the East, heading back across the country, another game that I think is definitely worthy of your opinion is this Indy 11 and Charleston Battery match. Charleston climbing the power rankings for you this past week. Obviously, the last couple of performances, it feels like Cal Jennings is right at home, but he is not the one who writes the headlines in this game. It's MD Myers, who's been on an absolute tear. I think the thing that was said by Rakestraw on the broadcast is he's had a great month this week. Any thoughts from this game?
Yeah, I mean, I'll let you kind of dig in wholesale to the Charleston changes shape wise, but I thought they did an excellent job of taking everything that Indy gave them. The 11 came out in a quite narrow kind of 5-2-1-2 press, give or take. And Charleston dominated the half spaces. They set themselves up to get into the channels, beat that Indy look. The 11 clearly kind of wanted to knife their outside center backs up, let those players intervene and try to make stops. All it led to was disorganization, missed rotations. The topic we talked about with the balance of Aiden Quinn and James Murphy in the pivot, it didn't really work out in this matchup. And again, credit to Charleston, who I thought were resplendent in the way that they shifted their formation to take advantage. But yeah, on the Indy side, a little bit worried. On the Charleston side, I moved them to number one in the power rankings for
Yeah.
a reason. They looked unreal.
Yeah, and we don't see Ben Pierman make wholesale changes in the look in terms of the shape. I can't recall the last time actually they did something that shifted the paradigm of what they're trying to do, like it looked like against Indy 11. Really started the game in something that resembled a 4-2-2 ish. With the ball, though, would shift into a back three. And to me, JD Torres occupying a much more free role, kind of given license to roam and find the game wherever he saw fit, was a really unique and interesting deployment. Is that what you saw?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, if you just look at some stills from this game, you wouldn't be wrong to think that Torres was playing as a wingback. That is the sort of position that he took up as a baseline and build. And the thing about Torres is nobody is more confident about taking other players on. Few players are as good about hitting switches on their left foot and getting teammates into play. He is just unbelievable at seeking out space like a heat seeking missile and then going at teams. And the way that the back three with Langston Blackstock kind of sitting lower from this right back, right center back spot, it just let them find those lanes into the channels constantly. And I just love the balance. I love the way that it took a little bit of a burden off Aaron Malloy and let him get forward a little bit more. There was a sequence, I think, late in the first half where Blackstock hits Torres. He's turning in the half space, and Aaron Malloy is able to make a forward like run ahead of him into the box. When was the last time we saw Aaron Malloy
Yeah.
liberated to do that sort of thing? I thought this almost 3-4-3 pseudo back three look was very, very well considered from Pierman, and it'll play against teams that are more organized than Indy.
Yeah, and it was like an elbowed back three, but it was also elbowing either way. Malloy would check
Yeah.
in, and then maybe Ordonez would go. Maybe Blackstock would go. Very interesting dynamic between Blackstock and JD, where JD would come deep and Blackstock would jut downfield as Malloy received the ball to create that kind of juxtaposition that would pull teams apart. And the nice thing about the 4-2-2, which is traditionally used in association with energy drink soccer and Red Bull and pressing, is that it creates a massive void of space in the middle of the field, especially in the first phase build-up, which is tailor-made, in my estimation, for a player like Cal Jennings, who's just constantly moving and prodding and probing, trying to find awkward positions. And it felt like the relationship between him and JD Torres really yielded something beautiful that maybe Charleston can take forward.
I think it's underrated that quite often down the stretch last season, Tampa Bay was using Jennings as a proper right winger.
Yeah.
He's got that skill set in his bag, and it just makes the connection on that right side all the more splendid to watch for the battery. I know I at least came into the season with some questions of you've got Torres, you've got Jennings and Myers and Arturo Rodriguez. I don't know how you fit those players onto the pitch. Clearly, Ben Pierman figured out the answer, and it's built around fluidity. It maximizes everybody. It makes the battery look like the contender we expected them to be.
Well, what's so fascinating is it feels like Battery have been so obsessed with this ability to play through the middle of teams. And this just
Yes.
abandoned that. And what I don't know is if it looked great because of Indy's defensive frailties, especially in system trying something new in this game, or if it looked great because it is great. Andy Myers profited off that. I'll tell you that much, as a guy who's able to just kind of lurk and sit on the last shoulder and just be physically imposing and ruthless in front of goal. It feels like this is sustainable, though. It feels like this is real. And I'll also add that Hosu's ability to just devour ground allows JD Torres to just float and not have to exist within the structure of the team and just impact the game with his overall quality and the flow of the contest wherever it may lead.
Hosu really hasn't had the opportunity to just be an anchor in the middle a lot of the time this season. We talked about him being a right back quite often, but even in the moments where he's been deployed ostensibly as a holding midfielder, it's been less of the destruction. He's had to kind of fill a role possessively. That the burden was not on him in that sense at all this time out. I think he ended up with 6 defensive actions and 6 recoveries, doing everything that Ben Pierman needed as that linchpin in the middle.
Yeah.
And he did quite well to stop Jack Blake, which is
Yep.
really the key challenge for Indy. Like if Blake can get activated between the lines, that's when the 11 start to give you problems. Hossam never let him breathe in that space in the middle. So yeah, credit to him, who I think would be easy to overlook within the balance of this new battery shape. But man, he was immense on the night.
Yep. Two thoughts on that specifically. I'll say this. I think the thesis after talking this out with you now is that the shape allowed players to play unburdened and just be who they are, their best selves within the context of this overall team. Feel like they weren't necessarily weighed down with tactical responsibility and framework from a system. And that is massive when players are able to play with that kind of freedom, right? Especially those of the quality that Battery have. Beyond that, just on the Hosu point, I think the thing that's emblematic to me of what I was worried about when I saw this in action in real time versus how it actually played was pretty simple. There's a sequence, I think, maybe 20 minutes in, maybe it's 1-0 at that point, right? And JD Torres is upfield. They're trying to win the ball back. They've just lost it in the final third. And he's on the opposite side of the field. He's on the far side of the field. And there's a switch, outlet to Malik Foster, and there's miles of space. And it's like, that's the danger. Torres is in the wrong place. There's a massive pocket of space. Indy can progress the ball and really apply some pressure here. Malik Foster maybe makes it 20 yards, and Hosu just says, nope, not going any further. You shall not pass. Go the other way. Do not collect $200. And if he can do that, this is going to be just fine.
That, and I mean, Torres, completely underrated as a player with an immense work rate. The number of times he was dropping, getting to end line, getting in Aiden Stanley's face to prevent Indy from doing anything, so impressive for one of the best creators in the USL. The team-wide buy-in, the way that they can be expressive but still understand the responsibilities, that's what set this game apart from my perspective.
All right, so that's enough, I guess, on this Charleston Indy game at this point. Indy, again, looking a little bit lifeless. There is a separation that is starting to form, certainly in the East, from basically 1-6 and everybody else at this stage in terms of the playoff race and what that's going to look like. As for the rest of the games, anything else that stood out to you?
In terms of a team continuing to exceed expectations, I think we have to talk about Miami. Miami FC moving into more of a proper 3-5-2 shape this time out. And when I say 3-5-2, kind of unlike Oakland, I mean it. Like the way that they used Brandon Bent and Matias Romero at the wingback positions was so expansive, so really trying to get into North Carolina's face. It dictated the way in which the match was played. It really prevented North Carolina from doing what they do best, pinning you back, leveraging that high line. I have been nothing but impressed with Gaston Madoni, and I don't think I expected to be saying that this year. So, yeah, shout out. That was really my big takeaway from this one.
The best Argentine manager in Miami, some are saying. Some are saying. I'm just saying. People, the streets are
Yeah,
talking.
hey,
Look out, Javier. This was not helpful for my Evan Conway plus Alex Anderson agenda, though, and I take affront to that.
it's a game where I think you really felt the lack of Ezra Armstrong starting at left wing back.
Yeah.
Well, North Carolina kind of needs that double pronged vertical threat. If you can just key in on Anderson, if you can know that it's going to be Anderson and Conway in the central areas, and there's not really much else, it is so much easier to defend against this team. If you have to be aware constantly of Ezra Armstrong being a speed demon up the left sideline, suddenly you've got a second strand of thought.
Mm-hmm.
You're not as able to maybe elevate your line and kind of win those second balls by being so active and so vertically compact. And I thought North Carolina just struggled to get out of their zone because of that, because of Miami's shape. And I thought Miami, in terms of the transition defense, really didn't miss a beat. Diego Mercado quickly becoming one of my favorite holding midfielders in the league, a very consistent player. A back line that I didn't trust in the offseason has come together very nicely. Bill Hamid still doing his thing. They figured out how to stem the tide that North Carolina wants to create, and they executed it for 90 minutes.
Yeah. Just a note on Mercado. I was just looking through the stats as you brought him up. 44 touches this game, 38 passes, which is unbelievable efficiency. That's 1-2 gone every time, which again just speaks to a level of ball retention. When was the last time Miami had that at all in midfield? I can't remember it.
Not even the good Miami teams of 2022 and
Yeah.
2023 had that player. He is so good with pressure down his back. And North Carolina can give that to you. Like that pivot, we've give them a lot of shout outs because they're good about turning you over. Mercado was the one man show that didn't let that happen and let the rest of the ideas develop.
Bonifiglio, back-to-back games with big contributions, gets a goal in this one. That back line, again, with Akinodi and Knudsen, looks like something sturdy enough to build around, adaptable as they were in this game, as you brought up. And it just plays into this overall notion that I think you wrote about in the power rankings this week, that there are no bad teams this year. We saw Hartford win this weekend. We'll talk about them in a second. Miami's won two in a row. Oakland have won two in a row. And those were the teams that looked hopeless in the early part of the year.
Yeah, I mean, obviously explained it a little bit more, kind of going team by team in the piece, but anybody can beat anybody in a given week in the USL, which has never been true. There have always been also rans, whether it's Miami, whether further back it's the MLS affiliate
Yeah.
clubs, that this season there just doesn't feel like a bottom feeder in that way. And it's going to mean these playoff races are paper thin margins when it gets down to brass tacks in the fall.
Really makes you think about if it's going to be like this, what promotion relegation is going to actually be like down the line. Who knows if it maintains this kind of tension? This could be a 1 year blip, but the reality is, and I think this plays into the idea that, like, okay, Oakland have found something that's a workable solution for them today. In years past, a team could just nail down one identity. It's like, this kind of works for us. Let's do this. And that might work for a full season, certainly for a couple months. I don't think that's true anymore. I think teams have gotten way faster at figuring each other out. And like Miami's found a solution for themselves. They changed the plan a little bit this game from the San Antonio game. I don't think this is a way that they can win games for the next 6 months, right? They're going to have to come with different ideas and have that versatility. And that, to me, is going to be the measure of the 8 teams that make the playoffs in each conference and the 4 teams that don't. How many times can you evolve and figure out a new way to win unless you're like Louisville and the one way that you play is so dominant because your players are so good that you just win every time?
No, absolutely. Coaching staffs, scouting departments, the ability to bring data into the mix. It's had a real leveling effect across the league where you can't really pull a fast one on anybody, but you need to be adaptable. You need to understand your strengths and how they might match up against other teams' styles, other teams' players. It makes every week that much more exciting for people like us who are trying to break this down, who want to understand what makes these teams tick, because it forces coaches to develop their philosophies, develop their systems in a way that isn't just one note. It becomes more holistic and it becomes more interesting.
Yeah, and I think that's why this is such a good incubator for coaches right now, is because it forces this degree of tactical meddling. You can't, again, just do the same thing week in, week out. Again, if Charleston can't do it, nobody can. And it kind of sailed out with Charleston. I think Connor Smith is fighting that right now, where there's a very specific way he wants to play, and it's not working. And that's a hard thing for a coach. These people are inherently dogmatic. That's how they get to these places. It's because they have strong beliefs in themselves and what they want to do. And that's becoming the early story of the season to me. Now that we've got enough games under the belt, how are teams changing? How are teams able to shed their skin week in, week out, and become something that helps them win that individual game? Because every team is a hurdle that needs hurdling. Now, nobody's just a log that you can step over.
Well, I mean, you mentioned that idea of adaptability, and I want to get into Hartford a little bit
Yeah,
because this was a match where, yeah, they absolutely showed that ability to adapt and evolve. Early in the season, Brendan Burke wanted to be Brendan Burke. It was 4-2-3-1. We're really going to prioritize what we're getting on the wings, and it didn't work. Hartford was miserable offensively, couldn't hit the broadside of a barn with any of their shot attempts. They gradually kind of switched into a back five, and this felt like the match where it finally came together. Specifically in the second half, when Brendan Burke takes Samuel Carriaga, somebody who was a real goal scorer for Memphis last season, slides him into the central midfield and basically just lets him set the tone, swing passes from side to side. It was the first time, arguably in the 2 seasons that we've seen Burke in Connecticut, where he had somebody who could be that metronome in the central midfield. And it almost resulted in this sense of playing keep away for Birmingham. The Legion couldn't counter, they couldn't get into their rhythms through the midfield like they want to do in possession. Hartford, because they were keeping the ball, shielded their defense. And for a defense that's been error prone, that was massive. It's at the table for Deshaun Beckford's goal late in this game, and it's something that feels like it can be sustainable. Get Carryaga in the middle, see what happens around him, continue to find those spots, but you can compete if you can just possess carefully and make sure you're avoiding the big mistakes.
Yeah, and it's a clever piece of workmanship from Brendan Burke in the sense that he understood that with Birmingham, if they don't have vertical space to attack, they don't have the central presence to play through teams. So we're going to do our best to try and negate that and prevent them from having those wide movements that make it so easy for a player like Ronaldo Damas to make one run, have the quality to finish, and Birmingham can manufacture something out of that. Like, you look at the overall statistical profile of this game, and it's only one shot on target for Birmingham throughout the course of the contest. Hartford had five. Now, how you get .92 xG out of five shots on target? Unsure. That's pretty incredible that they managed that. But whatever it takes, in Hartford, you keep a clean sheet at the end of the day, you've done your job as a team, right? Everything from there, you're building on a foundation that should be a formula to get a successful result, right?
They did very well in low block to always have two players ready whenever Trejo or Pasher got a touch. I thought TJ pressed this at the right center back spot, paired so well with Sebastian Anderson. And Danny Trejo, who was going at them from that side, I don't think he attempted a dribble, and he maybe got one in the 90 minutes. That's not what you want to see for Birmingham, and that is a sign of excellent defending for Hartford, a meaningful improvement for a team that has been like a sieve at times at the back. That's the growth that you need to see, and that's the pragmatism that we're talking about, the evolution from Burke, who's a positive manager who likes to play a fast-paced game, but has realized if I'm going to get results in this league in 2025, something's got to give.
Yeah. And for Hartford, coming off a long rest for unforeseen, let's say, circumstances regarding their playing surface, um, maybe a chance to look in the mirror and find. Again, these are the intangible things that, like, when we nerd out about the tactics, like, this is real human stuff. To look yourself in the mirror, dust yourself down, and take accountability for the things that you can control. If you're Hartford, the players and Brendan Burke, right? And you get this chance to refresh, and it shows up in a big way, albeit against a hamstrung Birmingham Legion that's in the lurch right now, and we don't know who the manager is going to be. And I thought this was going to move a lot quicker when they made a decisive move to get rid of Tommy Sohn. It kind of felt like, well, if you're going to do that, you probably have a backup plan lined up, right? That parachute hasn't opened yet, and these points are precious. Not taking 3 points off Hartford, not taking at least 1 point off Hartford, that may show up in the aggregate in this razor thin playoff race that we're talking about. So that's something to keep a pulse check on.
That's a huge deal. And I thought this was a game where you really felt the impact of starting Ramiz Hamuda and Jake Roof as your center back pairing. Two players in isolation that can be useful. Together, they just weren't up for the task. I thought Hamuda had a very weird game in terms of the positions he was taking up as Birmingham tried to build out. He's a young player. He's played a bit of fullback in his career, but it felt like he actively didn't know what spaces he needed to be in to keep climbing the ladder to allow his team to advance. I think most notably, it came to bear on the goal allowance, which was a sloppy turnover at the back, and then Matt Van Oekel bobbles the ball coming at him. But man, I don't know. Maybe this team improves when they're healthy, but it feels baffling to the point you're making that we haven't got that new coach in to establish a different vision because this team is treading water in a major way.
Yeah. Again, just to speak to maybe the lack of the presence in midfield or from the center backs being in weird and kind of flimsy positions throughout. And I will say this, those center backs get abandoned a little bit because of how
Mhm.
active the fullbacks are asked to be. They get put in tough spots. Like, I'm not going to throw that all onto them. But as a team that has the attacking talent, and we talk again about piano carriers and piano players, we know who the piano players are on this team. Only winning 36% of your aerial duels for a game is not ever going to cut it. Like, it just is not. Hartford wanted it more. The numbers bear that out across the board. I don't think that's unfair to say at all.
Oh, I mean, Birmingham is a team without a direction right now. They're a chicken with its head cut off. Eric Avila can only do so much in a terribly unenviable position.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, elsewhere in the league, the Catenaccio that exists in Sin City was punished ruthlessly by FC Tulsa, who apparently figured out how to offense in this game. They score four, Las Vegas score one. Um, Tulsa just continue to compile points in a place where it's going to certainly matter at the end of the year.
Incredibly impressive holistic performance from Tulsa. We've seen what this press can be all season long, but rarely has the press actually turned into chances. Like they've been good about getting stops, and they've missed some sort of cog between getting the stop and then breaking. That changed this time out. They were very good about forcing Las Vegas into traps, getting them into bad positions. And as soon as the turnover happened,
Yeah,
you were seeing Colley, you were seeing St. Clair possess, find Alex DeLu or Stefan Lukic at their feet, and going at the Las Vegas backline with this trident of an attacking front. And maybe it was the three forwards, maybe it was Owen Dom, Taylor Calhera, and a midfielder. The fact that it could be anybody was giving Las Vegas fits. Nobody knew who to track. You saw it. I think the real best example was the Stefan Lukic goal, which was a wonder goal in its own right. But it begins with AB Sissoko stepping up from central defense, cutting out a pass between the lines. Then you're finding Delu at his feet. Already by the time he receives, Calhera is occupying a defender. St. Clair has cut into the pocket to occupy another defender. The lights don't know what hit them by the time that goal finds the back of the net. That's the speed and intention I think we've been waiting for this team to show, and they brought it in Sin City.
yeah, I think you bring up the right guy too. We've seen Stefan Lukic now play the last two games and score in the last two games. This is his first start of the year. A player that I think that, bringing him in from Chattanooga Red Wolves, a team that struggled mightily last year, probably expected to be a bit of a bit part. A nice guy to have in the last 15 minutes to maybe be a creator, help you chase games, whatever. I actually think he might occupy an essential bridging role for this team going throughout the rest of the season. That again makes you re-examine what Tulsa's really capable of. Is that an overreaction?
It's an interesting calculus because you watch him play, you watch him kind of camp out in the half spaces and provide those crucial linking touches. And I at least am thinking he has to be a key piece. And then Tulsa has gone out and signed Jamie Weber this week for a club record transfer fee. They brought in Torre a couple weeks ago.
Yeah,
They're recruiting forwards actively, which is only going to make more competition. But I mean, if Lukic keeps playing like this, I don't think you can sit him.
yeah. And I do want to touch on that because I really commend Tulsa for understanding what they have early and immediately and being like, all right, we know we're two or three pieces away from maybe really doing something. We've not done that in a long time. We're not going to idle. Like, we're just going to go and invest. We're going to bring the guys in early, give them the proper time to bed in. Let's go. Let's do this right now. That has to be commended because that's not always the case in this league.
For Tulsa to go out and spend what's reportedly hundreds of thousands of dollars
Yeah.
on Jamie Weber, who's like a proven entity in South Africa, maybe the transition will be hard, but man, like there's a clear level of trust. And if I've learned nothing else, it's that Caleb Patterson Sewell isn't going to drop money like that unless he thinks the player is going to be good. I'm excited, and he cameoed late in this game and I think created a chance and got a shot. So he's doing the job already. I'm excited to see him get the
Yeah.
serious minutes.
And just a note on Jamie Weber, that transfer doesn't happen. That's not a transfer pathway that we see a lot. Not just talking about South Africa. Teams don't spend big money on players that aren't proven commodities in this league. We see interleague transfers. We see guys that have played in USL and scored, maybe coming back to USL for big numbers. We don't see that. A guy who's maybe not done it being brought in at a figure that's upwards of six figures. That does not happen often.
No, it's trend setting in a way. Tulsa adding a lot of guys from Australia, splashing out on Weber now. It's a different style of roster building, but I think it's a major path forward that a lot of clubs are going to start emulating in the near future.
Yeah, and that's the imprint of data analysis and all the scouting networks and all the things that we are excited about Phoenix Rising potentially doing with this wide web of scouting may expand the horizons for talent discovery in this league, which would be sick, quite honestly.
Yeah, huge deal.
Other games around the league, a 2-2 between Rising and Sacramento. I don't know if we necessarily need to touch on much there other than the fact that Rising are the most exciting team for the neutral in the league by far.
I feel like I need to say negative things about the Rising Pivot,
Sure.
which was absolutely invisible against the Republic. I've got much love for JP Scarce as a player. I think Noble Okello has a lot of upside in the midfield. Those two together didn't make sense against Sacramento, and the Republic found it far too easy to get into the final third, work from side to side without really any challenge. And it's unfair of me to blame the pivot entirely because the wide support was never there for Phoenix either. Like I thought this was a very messy defensive game from Rising, but it's just disheartening to see how good Gerald Margaritha and Damian Rivera can be, while the rest of the team feels like they can't get out of the mud.
Yeah. I do think that we looked at the stretch coming up for Sacramento, and it needs to be understood that this is a missed opportunity. Like, no way around
Yes.
it. We saw their next two games after the Louisville game, I believe it was, and we knew it was on the road against Orange County and on the road against Phoenix. And imagine a real place where, like, hey, they could be on 6 points through 6 games. That's kind of scary for a team that we thought was going to win the West potentially.
They're tied for last right now in the Western Conference. Like that's crazy. Yeah.
And they had a 2 goal lead, and they looked in charge. And Phoenix looked like they had no idea what it was like to play a home game where the sun was still out, quite frankly. Um, and then it slipped away, and like I don't know, this has happened multiple times now to Sacramento. The Switchbacks did this to them in their own venue, so like it's not as smooth of a transition as I think any of us considered when Neil Collins took this job, and it's just like, okay, yeah, Neil Collins, they'll be fine.
I feel like I've claimed injury a lot of times today, but you look at a midfield that's
Yeah,
Blake Willie and Michelle Benitez,
fair.
that's not what you want to see. But still, like,
Yep,
what? We're
still,
6 games in. We've had the Open Cup against El Farolito. We should have a better sense of how Sacramento wants to play and who are going to be the key players that facilitate it and hold it together. I don't know if anybody outside of Freddie Kleeman has really grabbed this defense by the scruff of the neck and said, I'm a key piece. And it's great to have one center back who's doing that job. Beyond him, there's a whole lot of question marks in the defensive zone.
yeah. I will say this as well. The thought has been posited that because this is Rising's worst start on points in the modern or any Rising era, that it's time to start pointing fingers somewhere. I would just like to contend this. They've also scored the most goals in the entire Western Conference, even if they are in last currently. And they are 3 points off fifth. So I don't know. Maybe it's weird to call 7 games into the season a sample size that actually is indicative of what a team is going to be at the end of the year, or arbitrarily assign that this is the start of a season. I don't know. Let's see like 10, 15 games. They just won an Open Cup match against a team that we think is pretty good. They've been in every game they've played, and 5 minutes against Detroit goes the wrong way. And this is a completely different dynamic if it doesn't.
Context matters. Like, I think if you watch these teams play, you can come away with a better sense of what's meaningful. Like, I watch Las Vegas, for instance. I see a club that maybe they have more points than Phoenix Rising,
Yeah,
but I'm very unimpressed with the ideas, and I don't think that they really understand what they're building towards. Phoenix Rising has an unassailable idea of the platonic ideal of what this team will become. We've seen flashes of it. We know what the offense is going to be. If they can figure out the back half, then it's problem solved. And there's a real vision there. And I think that's why we've talked about Phoenix a lot and we find them so enthralling, is because the potential is obvious and it's vast.
yeah, yeah. They've got maybe the best soloist in the league in Joe Margaritha, who, by the way, who's just getting back after missing the start of the season with injury. And I just, if I were a fan of this club, I would have to appreciate the amount of spirit the team is showing this year compared to last season, right? And to downplay just what's been a very up and down start to the season, but a season that has clearly presented a ceiling that is in contention by the end of the year if they fix a couple things in the back end of the team. They've also allowed 16 goals in 7 games. That's not great, but at least you know what you need to fix, right? And it's a team that typically has made moves in season to enrich whatever deficiencies they have. So that might be the biggest question for me in the Western Conference at this point. Who does Rising bring in to fix this problem, and how does it shift their dynamic?
100%. Like I'm so excited to see how they advance from this point because the flashes are there. Players like Braxton Montgomery feel like they can be contributors. I know I didn't have like Jamison Ping on my bingo card as a possible contributor. Phoenix has had some unexpected breakouts already, and they're never one to rest on their
Yeah.
laurels.
Yeah, and not to just bully on Rhode Island again, but it's not some Nimulus problem in the, it's like there's one part in the Toyota engine that isn't doing what it's supposed to do, but we don't know what it is, and there's just a cascade of problems. With Rising, it's clearly identifiable. Like, a fan's broken, right? Like we know what we need to fix. We'll just order the part. We're good. Which I appreciate the simplicity of their potential solution personally. That's just my reading of that situation. We can move on, though. I don't think there's anything to contribute on Monterey Bay and Lexington unless you have something.
Lexington, man, they cannot score. They feel like they're just stalling out whenever they hit the final third. I don't have an explanation, but yeah.
Yep. The Ball Father. That is what the name Abul Latif translates to in Arabic, in Egyptian Arabic specifically, I think. I don't know. I got this from a source. I don't speak that
Well,
language.
this got quoted on the broadcast, so it's got a
It
long
did?
legacy at this point. It did. We got a long explanation of Ballfather.
I love this. The Ball Father is the best player in the USL Championship, maybe in some time. This guy's insane.
I mean, if you think about the go-ahead goal scoring sequence for Loudoun against Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh, by the way, a team that played very narrow,
Yeah.
compressing space in their 4-2-3-1, did not give Abdelatif Abakora chances to get the ball. And then you get one sequence where Loudon can bounce off a center mid, find Abakora. The second he gets a touch in the left channel, four different Riverhounds players immediately are snapping their eye lines to him, losing a sense of any other Loudon runner. Suddenly the threat is on. Abakora can turn, he can hit Kwame Awuwa. Seconds later, you're ending up with a cross into Wesley Leggett to take the lead. Abakora is the pass before the assist, and yet he is critical to that play because defenses know he is that guy. He's the father of ball. He's going to do what he does and set this team up for success.
Yeah. Yeah, dude, he can kill you quietly. He can kill you from a million miles away. He can also kill you very loudly and violently. And this is taking a turn towards a dark corner that I didn't intend when I started talking about it. But yeah, Abukora just puts a smile on your face, doesn't he?
Did you have Abdelatif Abakora and Darren Smith as your early Golden Boot leaders? Because I did not.
It couldn't be me. Couldn't be me. I think I had Cal Jennings in pen on that one, which still may come good. Still may come good. Oh.
He's one goal behind, so
Yeah,
you're in
yeah,
good shape.
okay, we've talked about every game aside from one, so I do feel obligated to at least write a line for Colorado Springs and El Paso Locomotive. 1-1 there. I believe that Colorado Springs spent a large portion of this game.
Zach Zandy gets a red card maybe 25 seconds into the second half, which is
Yeah.
not what you want to see.
No, you'd like for him to do that 25 seconds before the half if he's going to do it at all. 2 goals in the first 15 minutes, switchbacks. I don't know what you say at this point. We've talked a lot about them.
I liked what I saw from Hanya and Endeley. I didn't like playing down a man for 45 minutes.
Ideally, not something you want to do. Jaeger Cup. That's a thing that's happening this weekend. Want to talk about that at all before we go?
So excited to see, I mean, the practical experiment of a lot of League One and Championship games played competitively, played on weekends, so you can go first choice if you so choose. It's a lovely natural experiment for people like us who are interested in the league gap. And it's just fun to see different teams matching up. So could not be more excited.
We actually get to see if Miami FC is better than League One teams, which was probably maybe not true last year, probably true this year. That's going to be
Boy,
that'll be exciting. Uh,
so excited.
This is a good little appetizer for Pro Rel also, which I think needs to be discussed in detail. I'm going to ask you for the matchup menu that you're going to select at the weekend. What are the games that you're going to make sure are appointment viewing?
Naples Charleston is one that I am fascinated by. Naples finally lost a game in the league to Knoxville on Saturday, but they are so organized. What they do in central defense with Breck Evans and Jake Dengler, that team is hard to beat. And I mean, it's why they almost beat Tampa Bay in the Open Cup.
Yeah,
That one is fascinating to me. Union Omaha always brings it, and they're playing against New Mexico United. Those are two organizations that feel like they're so well run, and I'm excited to see tactically Casciato ball, which is typically a back five. They're fairly controlling with what they do possessively against Dennis Sanchez,
yeah,
who is the patron saint of possession. I'm going to be at the Westchester, Rhode Island game on Sunday, so
yeah.
naturally excited for that one. But yeah, man, every single one of these games,
Yep.
I at least have some level of intrigue.
Yep. Well, Knoxville opening up their new home stadium. That it's a converted baseball facility, but mind you, was something that was built with soccer in mind. One Knox had been a tenant there since before the stadium was actually constructed. So I'm kind of curious to see what that looks like. I'm calling the Forward Madison Indy 11 game. So come hang
Let's
out on
go.
that one. That's the one that I will be paying attention to because it's literally my job. But yeah, this competition is going to be thrilling the whole way through, and I cannot wait to see what it looks like exactly. So, all right. I think everything that needs to be said has been just about said. We talked for a while, Ryan. We miss you dearly. The soccer will be on this weekend, as we just told you, and you should go and watch it. We'll talk to you soon, kids.